Alright, let's take a minute to look at the setup and the layout that I'll be using for the rest of this series. You might notice that the panels are laid out a little bit differently than I do in the previous videos. Importantly, there's brush presets that I'll dock here on the left side of the screen. Now, normally I don't have this out, and when I'm painting I definitely don't have it out, but since there are only 9 brushes that I'll be using, I'm going to keep this on screen just so you can see me switching brushes. And if you want to follow along, you can use the exact same ones. Next off, let's go ahead and actually install that brush pack. And if you've never installed custom brushes before, it is very easy. But the important thing to do first is to make a backup. So you can go to Window, Brush Presets, or simply right-click. And either way, you're going to go to the menu on the right side and say Save Brushes. And this will prompt you to create a file that has a .abr extension. You can put it anywhere you want and just call it something like all of my brushes, and then maybe put the year on there. This is going to be a backup for you to revert to whenever you want to. Okay, once you've done that, go ahead and click Replace Brushes. Then navigate to the Resources folder in your zip file and select the Control Paint Dynamic Brushes brush file. Click Load, and then your screen should look pretty much like mine does here. It is 9 brushes, and those are the only ones we're going to use in this series. Now, as you know, I really like keyboard shortcuts. And for this process, I am going to assume that you're going to be using some as well. So of course you're going to be using the basic brush control keyboard shortcuts. That sort of goes without saying. But there are 5 extra shortcuts that are going to be really important in order to do this sort of fluently. So you're not digging through menus constantly, because the whole idea is to keep this loose and lively. So on the left side of the screen, you can see there are 2 layer related ones. You want to be able to make a new layer with a single button press, and then also merge your current layer down onto the stack. Not flatten, but merge down. And then on each layer, you're going to want to be able to do 3 different things. You're going to want to be able to lock transparent pixels, turn the current layer into a clipping mask, and add an empty layer mask onto your current layer. Now for 2 of these, you can just do a simple keyboard shortcut. Go into Preferences, assign a shortcut somewhere easy, and you're good to go. Now, for whatever reason, Photoshop doesn't make it quite so easy for the other 3. So what I like to do is make an action. And the way you do that is you go into the Window panel, open your Actions, and then just make a new action, give it a name like Add Empty Layer Mask, give it a F key as the function key, and then hit record. Now each of these 3 actions are just going to be the one step. So if I were making the lock transparent pixels, I would say record. I would go over here and click the lock transparent pixels button, and that's it. It only needs to be 1 step long. And then I hit stop, and my action's good to go. Now the reason I do that is because for whatever reason, Photoshop won't allow me to assign a keyboard shortcut to certain aspects of the program. So lock transparent pixels, for instance, you can't assign a shortcut. Well, if you make it an action, the actions can be assigned to your F keys, so you're good to go. So with that in mind, take a minute to familiarize yourself with New Layer, Merge Down, Lock Transparent, Clipping Mask, and Empty Layer Mask. Because I'm not going to be stopping in the future videos to talk about each command, but I'm going to be using these 5 commands an awful lot. So for me, I like having them right by my fingertips. And wherever you want to put them on your keyboard, that's up to you. So let's have a quick review of what these various commands do that we're going to be using throughout the rest of the series. So new layer, that one's obvious. Next, I will paint on that layer. And I'm going to lock the transparent pixels. So here, if I were to paint with a different color, I cannot change that silhouette. It is locked. Next, I'll make a new layer and turn that layer into a clipping mask. So what this does is it only allows me to paint on top of the shape of the lower layer. So as you can see here, I'm only painting on top of that earlier squiggle. But if I were to convert this back into a normal layer, you can see I actually painted quite a large blob. So I'll make that a clipping mask again. You can see it moves separately, so it is somewhat like an overlay, but it is controlled by the shape of the lower layer. Now, moving back to that lower layer, I'm going to add an empty layer mask. Here, I am now painting in the layer mask, And to do that, I'll use black and white. So if I were to use black with the brush tool, I'd hide away that layer. If I were to switch colors to white, I could reveal it again. So it's not like using the eraser. It is instead a non-destructive way to modify the shape of your layer. And then finally, selecting my clipping mask layer here, I'm going to merge this down. So now I only have one layer, although you notice it does still have that layer mask attached to it. So sometimes I'll add a new blank layer, select both of those two layers, use the merge down command, and that will remove the mask, leaving me with just this one layer left. And those are the major commands that I'll be using for all these real-world examples. Okay, let's take a look at the custom brushes included in the series.